Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, spent 5 hours on Capitol Hill today talking about Russia and its alleged influence on Donald Trump's presidential campaign. But that's not the only big story that involves Russia and the Attorney General. Yesterday, Sessions announced in a letter that he has directed the Department of Justice to take a closer look at the Obama-era Uranium One deal, something we've covered a lot on this show. In that letter, the Attorney General signaled he was open to appointing a special counsel to investigate that deal and any involvement by Hillary Clinton. Richard Goodstein is a lawyer. He's advised both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns, and he joins us tonight. Richard, thanks for coming on.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start on a totally apolitical note, just citizen to citizen, American to American. Does it bother you at all that the Obama administration allowed Russia, given all you now believe about Russia, access to a pretty large percentage of our uranium reserves?
No. Let me give you 3 facts as to why not. First, uranium is not a dear commodity. The price has come down by 3/4 over the past 10 years. Kazakhstan is the biggest source of uranium on the planet. Russia's basically got good control over that. Russia has its own uranium, okay? And the uranium that Russia ended up controlling thanks to Uranium One, which, incidentally, Hillary Clinton had 0 role in, to the extent that it went out of the country at all, and most of it won't, it went to Canada, got reprocessed, and then came back to the U.S. So, no,
right. Well, hold on. That's just as a factual matter. Some of it went beyond Canada and went to Europe, and where it went, then we don't know. And it left without an export license. But hold on, wait. But I'm a little confused, and we'll get to Hillary in just a second. But I'm a little confused, given that you've come on the show so many times to say that Russia is our primary adversary on the global stage, that they seek to undermine the U.S. government, that we're at war with them, that you would be comfortable with giving them control of some of our uranium. What would be the strategic benefit to the United States in doing that? Why would we do that?
So again, if there's a commodity that's come down by 3/4 in price over the past 10 years, that tells you it's not a very dear commodity. So what you're suggesting is the person who owns that land out in Wyoming or wherever should be made to sit on it rather than capitalizing on it.
No, I'm saying that if you believe that Russia is a threat to the United States, you probably wouldn't want to give them control over it. And if that uranium was meaningless, then answer this if you would. Why did the Clinton Foundation encourage Uranium One to hire the Podesta Group to lobby the Clinton State Department for this deal approval? If it was not a big deal, why would they go to the trouble of hiring the brother of Hillary's campaign manager to lobby for the deal? I'm confused.
Yeah, you'll have to ask them. I have no idea. Because of the fact that Hillary Clinton had no role herself, and because under CFIUS, the Committee for the Foreign Investment in the United States,
yes, I know what
there's
it is.
9 agencies, right? The Treasury is the lead agency in these CFIUS deals.
True.
State is one of 9, and again, it never reached Hillary's desk. So you have to ask them why.
Wait, but hold on, no, but I'm a little bit confused, because we know from the last campaign that Hillary Clinton was the most successful and best informed Secretary of State in the history of this republic. Given that,
that's true. Why
wouldn't she be involved in the transfer of ownership of an essential natural resource like uranium to our primary geopolitical adversary? Why wouldn't she be involved in the details of that? What was she doing? It seems negligent. No, I'm serious.
It's the premise that it's this essential national resource. It's used mainly anymore in nuclear power plants, which incidentally are not economic thanks to the low price of natural gas. So it's that's the problem with this.
But if that was so, but hold on. But wait a second. If that's true, then why was the Russian government so anxious to get this done that they hired the Podesta Group in order to lobby Hillary? What do you know that they didn't know? No. Why would they spend that money trying to lobby her if it was not a big deal and she had no role?
We know that the Russian economy is in the tank, right? It's what, smaller than Italy or something like that, or some states in the U.S.
I thought they were a huge threat to us. I'm confused.
My point is, we don't exactly look to the Russian to make smart economic decisions. So whoever they hired to do this, you have to ask them. Honestly, it doesn't make any sense.
They're irrational. But it does. But hold on. Look, and there are a lot of questions to which I don't know the answer. I'm not going to pretend that I do. I don't have the full storyline here. But typically in Washington, where you live and you know it well, when people hire a lobbyist to lobby someone, they're spending their own money to do that.
Yeah.
they're expecting something in return. You're saying it was totally accidental, it was irrational.
No,
Hillary, for some
accidental.
reason, didn't have anything to... Oh, okay. Then why would they hire the Podesta group to do that?
The CFIUS process is a complicated process. Any entity that wants to go through it needs to actually have its ducks in a row. And whether it's the Podesta group or any other, there are law firms throughout the city that make big money at helping companies get through CFIUS, okay? So in this case, it was Podesta. The next day, it will be somebody else. It's just not that big a deal. And again, the core issue is that uranium is just not that treasured.
It's not that big a deal. Would you recommend handing over more of our uranium supplies to the Russian government? Do you think? Would you feel comfortable if the Trump administration signed off on a deal like this? We're allowing the country that's seeking our destruction to have control of some of our uranium. Yeah. Would you recommend the Trump administration pursue that same policy? Is that a wise policy? Do you think?
The amount of uranium, it would be a problem.
It's a simple question. Would you be happy if the Trump people did that?
It would be a problem to relinquish uranium if we started building tons of nuclear power plants. But with our demand for nuclear weapons, it's not. And that's the fantasy underlying this, that the people who are fanning this want to have people believe.
Really? I'm wondering, I mean, I can't really tell. On some topics, you seem to think Russia is a disorganized, impoverished state that poses no threat to us. And on others, they're a supervillain that, quote, hacked our elections.
So the only thing it's got going for it is its villainy, right? That's the only thing. Its economy is not strong. But the fact of the matter is, again, Kazakhstan has 39% of the world's uranium. That's where Russia's neighbor, right? Russians have control over that. They don't really need to come here to, like, steal our precious sweet source.
But for some reason they did. I wonder why. Richard, thank you for joining us. That was fascinating. Well, despite supposedly being a Russian operation, for some reason the Trump White House has cracked down on Russia Today. That's the Kremlin-backed news outlet, the cable outlet. And it was informed yesterday by DOJ that it must now register as a foreign agent. A lot of journalists in Washington are applauding this. Why is that? Max Blumenthal has been watching carefully. He's a senior editor at Alternet, and he joins us tonight. Max, it's no defense of the content of RT to wonder why journalists who are rightly concerned about any government attempt to regulate their product are applauding the regulation of this cable channel. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, the Washington Post has said democracy dies in darkness, but they've been pushing this campaign against RT on a, what I would consider a shoddy basis, and we're watching democracy kind of fall apart, and the Washington Post and other mainstream outlets are bringing the darkness or the silence. I mean, the ACLU is silent on this matter. RT was threatened with the arrest of its news director and the seizure of its assets. We're witnessing the rebirth of a kind of new McCarthyism, in my opinion, and let me just talk about why I think this is happening. I mean, I go on RT fairly regularly, and the reason I do so is because while the three major cable networks are promoting bombing and sanctioning half the world, at least the non-compliant nations in it, RT is questioning that. They let me talk about, for example, what the real sources of foreign influence are in this town, including the Israel lobby and organizations like AIPAC, which have been promoting a humanitarian catastrophe in the Gaza Strip, war on Lebanon, war on Iran, and which is not required for some reason to register as a foreign agent, and I don't know why that is.
Are there other news organizations that have been required to register as foreign agents other than this one?
Well, I think there are three, and they did so voluntarily. So this is an unprecedented step. And, another indication of why it happened was the January ODNI report, which accused RT of such horrible sins as hosting a third-party debate, presenting an anti-war view in Syria, where the U.S. and its Gulf allies had been waging a proxy war to promote regime change and promoting radical discontent. So that means giving a platform to voices like myself or Abby Martin, the former host of Breaking the Set, or Chris Hedges, who hosts an Emmy-nominated show for RT, and who is the former Middle East bureau chief of the New York Times. So this is an unprecedented step. It's an attack on press freedom. And again, we are hearing complete silence from the mainstream media, which is pushing this campaign of hysteria.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's the remarkable part of this, because reporters have, and I think it's noble most of the time, this reflexive instinct to defend the right of news organizations to say what they want, but not in this case. And I just think, I don't understand. Where's the Committee to Protect Journalists on this?
Yeah, I mean, during the Obama era, I think it was Robert Gibbs, Obama's press secretary, he said Fox News is not a real news organization.
Yeah,
and Jake Tapper stood up in the White House press gallery and said, no, Fox News is our sister organization, we must defend it. But Jake Tapper has been driving the campaign against RT America, basically inciting against its American employees, and we see this from CNN and MSNBC with no content analysis. Now let's talk about the real foreign influence in Washington from, for example, the Saudi and UAE monarchies, which are responsible for the worst humanitarian catastrophe in the world in Yemen. Why do we never hear about that on any news network except for RT? That speaks to why there's so much hostility towards RT, because they're exposing the real sources of influence in this town.
Max, thank you. I appreciate that analysis.
Thanks for having me.
Joined now by Fox senior political analyst Britt Hume to help unravel part of what happened today with the Attorney General. As you saw, Britt, the Attorney General came under what seemed like fire from Republicans on the Hill who are anxious to see an independent counsel investigation of the Clintons and Uranium One. Explain the cross-currents there, if you would.
Well, Republicans want an independent counsel investigation of the Clintons and Uranium One for much the same reason the Democrats wanted a special counsel investigation of Russian meddling in the election, because they think it will reflect badly on the other side. And Sessions, I think to his credit, resisted saying that he was going to do that. He said he would have the appropriate people under the manual that governs the behavior of people in the Department of Justice look at it and see if the facts of the case met the standard for the appointment of a special counsel. That's where the matter was left.
Huh. So what do you think is likely to happen? Do you think there will be an independent counsel investigation, or a couple of them?
Well, I don't know. It'll depend on what lawyers in the department say. I know some conservatives who want this to happen are very pessimistic because they think the career lawyers left over from the Obama years will be the ones who make the call, and it will never happen. My own view, Tucker, for what it's worth, is that special counsels are always and everywhere a bad idea. And the reason is not that they're not honorable people who conduct these investigations. The reason is that you're carving out a certain case for investigation by a largely unaccountable prosecutor who has but one case that he or she must deal with. And, you know, there's ostensibly a grant of what's called a measure of independence. But as a practical matter, it is nearly total independence with a virtually unlimited budget for the special counsel to go forward. And it amounts, Tucker, to a roving commission. And we see that illustrated. We've seen it time and time again, that offenses that were one would never have contemplated when an investigation is undertaken end up being prosecuted. The Manafort case is one example. That the activities that were charged in that case occurred, nearly all of them, before the Trump campaign was even born, and had nothing, so far as we know, whatever to do with the Trump campaign and its relations with Russia, which were a part of the investigation. But you see, once these things get started, they can metastasize in any direction. And it's not as if the Department of Justice can look at this and say, look, we got a long list of things we need to investigate and possibly prosecute. This particular matter does not rank high enough to warrant the commission of resources to it, and it would be a lower priority matter. Once you put the special counsel on the case, it is priority one, and he can go wherever he wants. He can use such FBI resources as he needs, and on it goes. I just think, and as a constitutional matter, I think there's an accountability issue that these things raise that have not been satisfactorily answered.
And next thing you know, you've got FBI agents pulling you out of the shower, which just happened. Britt, thank you very much for that.
Well, yeah, and coming into your home in the wee hours of the morning, you know, for some federal criminal financial offense. Really.
Wouldn't want that. Thank you, Britt.
Who would, right? Yeah, you bet.
A national hero may have been eaten by giant crabs. When? Who? That's minutes away. And with the congressional immigration debate well underway, we'll ask a Republican congressman why the party is letting Democrats take the driver's seat on that issue. Puzzling. Next. Last fall, Republicans took over all levels of government. You may remember when that happened. It was a campaign defined by the issue of immigration. There were a lot of issues, but I think it's fair to say that was the biggest one. Donald Trump called unequivocally for protecting the border and for reshaping immigration policy to serve the interests of Americans, ordinary Americans, not just big donors who want cheap housekeepers. Democrats, meanwhile, moved in the opposite direction. They created sanctuary cities. They demanded amnesty for people here illegally. They attacked the very idea of citizenship as bigoted. In the end, Trump won. Democrats lost, in part because of their relative positions on this issue. Given all of that, it was just a year ago, it was bewildering to read a piece in Axios just 2 days ago with this title, quote, "Democrats in the driver's seat on DACA." Now, according to that story, congressional Democrats are confident they can get Republicans to concede to a full amnesty for all DACA recipients with no concessions. Not a concession on limiting chain migration, not one to stop future illegal immigration, not one to block another even bigger amnesty, say, a decade down the road. Unnamed Democrats in this piece were quoted openly boasting they can do whatever they want on immigration. They can move the country as far left as they care to because they believe the president has given up on the issue. He doesn't want to fight it. Republicans in Congress, of course, really don't care about enforcing immigration law, a lot of them anyway. Can this be true? Sadly, it might be true. On immigration, many Republican lawmakers actively despise the views of their own voters. They're happy to let just about anyone into this country illegally and hand them citizenship, even though they know for a fact that virtually everyone will vote Democrat. Is it reckless? Is it self-destructive? Is it terrible for America? Yes, it is. It's all those things, and yet it's happening. The president shouldn't fall for this trick, though. He was elected by American citizens, not by DACA recipients. It turns out in polling done this week, less than 30% of Americans think that giving citizenship to illegal immigrants ought to be a priority. There are a lot of other things going on in this country, like, I don't know, a drug epidemic that's paralyzing entire regions, a middle class that's shrinking and getting poorer. Republicans were elected to fix those problems. Maybe they should start there. Are they? Congressman Trent Franks is a Republican. He represents Arizona, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Tucker.
This piece was surprising to those who were paying attention to the last election. The signature issue, I think is fair to say, of the Trump campaign was immigration and tightening the border. And this piece suggests that Republicans are unwilling to demand real concessions in exchange for legalizing people here illegally. Is that true?
Well, I think there is a struggle there. I think the Democrats and the left in general, Tucker, have been very capable of using some of these children as almost like human policy shields. I've seen over the years, my life has been about children's issues, and primarily children's issues and national security is what I do in Congress. And it's been especially difficult for me sometimes to see the policies of the left. They use this notion it's for the children that they're doing, but many times it ends up being the worst thing for the children. And I've just seen it so many times, and I think that this is another example where they use the leverage of making it sound like Republicans don't care about children, and they work on us psychologically in ways that are pretty effective. But if you really look at it carefully, some of the immigration policies, even the Obama administration, end up putting a lot of children from south of the border at risk because it encouraged them to come over the border.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
But then why not fix it? Why not say, look, everyone feels sorry for people brought here as children, stateless, without citizenship? Of course. It's not a matter of being mean to the children. But why should the United States, at a time when so many people don't have jobs and wages are stagnant, allow people who get citizenship to bring all their relatives with them, chain migration to continue? Why is that? Why can't Republicans say, we're not doing this unless you concede that's not part of the deal. I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, I obviously agree with you completely. I mean, the chain migration thing is an especially onerous thing. The terrorist that, shot so many people up brought 23 people over with him, and I know that that's a common understanding among a lot of folks. But the bottom line is, one of the greatest things that America can do for the world's children is to make sure we protect the foundational policies in this flagship of freedom called America, so that we can continue to be the example and the beacon of freedom for the whole world, so that people that never get a chance to come here, which is by far the vast majority of children in the world, that they have a chance to be the beneficiaries of the leadership this country provides to the world.
But here's what confuses me. I thought one of the lessons of the last election was American voters would like their government to pay attention to things that matter to them, and not put people from other countries ahead of them in line. And yet I keep reading story after story saying Republicans in the Congress, and it quotes a lot of them, saying we've got to deal with this. Really? Because 60,000 people died last year of drug ODs. I don't see Americans. I don't see the same anxiousness to deal with that problem. Why?
Well, I do think that, like I say, that the left has tried to portray Republicans as uncaring toward children, and we just have to be strong enough to say, no, we know who we are. I mean, like I say, I used to head the Governor's Office for Children. I chair the Orphans and Vulnerable Children Caucus, the Adoption Caucus, the Foster Youth Caucus, and I co-chair the Pro-Life Caucus in the Congress. So, I mean, these issues are extremely important to me, and I'm a little tired of the left who stands up and supports, killing children moments before they're born. Most of the Democrats in the House voted against protecting born alive children, and I'm tired of them telling me that we don't care about children.
Yeah,
and using it then as leverage.
They'll keep saying it no matter what, in my view. Congressman, thank you for that.
And thank you, sir.
Feminists helped save Bill Clinton's presidency 20 years ago after he faced a wave of sexual misconduct allegations. Is it time to hold them to account? Why do professional feminists always ride to the rescue of sexual harassers they agree with? Interesting question. Tammy Bruce, coming up. Senate candidate Roy Moore remains in the news tonight. Embattled is the cliche we use. More allegations have emerged about his behavior in the 1970s and 80s. One woman says Moore sexually assaulted her at the age of 16. As evidence that the two actually knew each other, she pulled out a high school yearbook that he apparently signed. Others have accused Moore of being banned from a local shopping mall because he kept trying to pick up young women who were hanging around Orange Julius. Moore has vehemently denied all of this. Who's telling the truth? Well, at this point, it's impossible to know for sure. Here's what we do know for sure. Roy Moore should respond to specific allegations with specific explanations. It's not enough to say people don't like him for what he believes. In a recent tweet, Moore declared that, quote, the forces of evil will lie, cheat, steal, even inflict physical harm if they believe it will silence and shut up Christian conservatives. In an interview, Moore said the allegations against him are a smear by people who, quote, don't want to hear the truths about God and about the Constitution. Now, there is some truth in that. Of course, there are people who hate Roy Moore because of his beliefs, his Christian beliefs. The entire American left, for example. But that's not exactly the point here. The point is that Moore has been accused of appalling behavior on the record by a number of women, not all of them liberals, at least one of them a Trump voter. Moore's response? He's claiming to be the victim of bigotry. Now, that's what demagogues do when they're cornered. That's what Al Sharpton does. Not everyone accused of something is guilty of it, obviously. We ought to keep that in mind, not just in Moore's case, but in all of these cases. Roy Moore has every right to protest his innocence, and maybe he is innocent. What he's not allowed to do is drag God into all of this. God is not accused of trolling for teenagers in shopping malls. This is not about Christianity. It's about Roy Moore. And it discredits Christianity when Christians allow Moore to use his faith as a shield. It's offensive to real believers. Tammy Moore is a radio host, and she joins us tonight.
Hey.
So, Tammy, I guess what bothers me, look, I almost hate to weigh in on this because it's one of those stories where, everybody I disagree with who hates Roy Moore for all the wrong reasons, which is to say because of his beliefs, is weighing in on one side of it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that conservatives ought to follow the script that Al Sharpton wrote and practices infuriatingly, which is caught not paying his taxes, claims bias. And it looks to me like Roy Moore is doing the same thing with Christianity, a faith I happen to believe in. And so there's something really wrong about that, I think.
Well, it's like we've all been trained, isn't it? It's like we've all been educated about how to respond to this. And the problem is that we've seen it work. We've seen it work on the left. And so this is what you've got. It's kind of a conflation of all the awful things that we've heard and the problems ranging from Teddy Kennedy, who left a woman to drown in the bottom of a lake and became the lion of the Senate, to Bill Clinton. And now you've got a man who is facing, I think, at this point, some credible allegations. And there is now this resistance, understandably by people, to accept that. Or at least to put up with the accusation on the point of the matter, the principle of the matter, of that we're not going to be folding like a cheap suit, or we're not going to be bullied out of a race or out of being able to help this country, as many people, of course, in Alabama want to do with the election of whoever will be their senator. So it's more of this conflation and this resistance to the establishment. And now, you got McConnell and others, of course, who also were funding his opposition, saying he shouldn't be there, combined with Tucker, the efforts to what people think is to nullify the presidential election. Now it looks like they want to nullify the primary that occurred. This is all coming together perhaps in the midst of someone like Andy Griffith's fabulous character Lonesome Rhodes, or Elmer Gantry as an example, is that this is problematic across the board, and I don't know if anyone is a winner at this point.
You just go back to how you live your life and how you want your children to live theirs. If you, or I'll just say for myself, if one of my kids got caught cheating, was accused of cheating by the school, and I said, "Did you cheat?" and he said, "The school just doesn't like me because of my politics," I'd spank him. I'd say, "You're not answering. That's a non sequitur. Maybe they don't like you because of your politics or whatever, but the question is, did you cheat or not? And man up and answer the question directly. Don't hide behind some non sequitur. Answer the question." And I don't know why we would ever allow anybody on either side to get away with that dodge.
Well, at the same time, we've also seen where there have been cheats on the other side, if you will. A lot of people think of the Duke lacrosse, like Duke lacrosse. People think of that. They think of Tawana Brawley. They think of environments where there have been false accusations, where the media has perpetrated false allegations or protected those who are accused. And now we've got this general rejection of any of that. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in Alabama. I do know that most of us are disgusted with the entire process. At the same time, those women, there are more of them, as you noted, do seem credible. This seems to be very serious. And right now, the people of Alabama, they're going to want a decent alternative if they want one. But the more that this seems like it's the establishment trying to manipulate or to punish people, the more they're going to push back against it.
It's a very smart analysis. I covered the Duke lacrosse case, by the way, and I knew those guys. I still know them. And when they were accused, they didn't claim bias, though there was bias. They said, this didn't happen, and here's why. And they were specific in their denials. And that's how you know who's telling the truth, I think. Tim, it was great to see you. Thank you for your clarity, as always. We're celebrating our one-year anniversary on the air tonight. Amazing how fast it went. A special guest from our very first show in the Friend Zone tonight. Stay tuned. Time now for the Friend Zone. We welcome one of our friends from here at Fox News onto the show. The show has no older friend than Maria Bartiromo. She hosts Mornings with Maria, of course, on Fox Business. She was the very first person we booked when we started a year ago. Thankfully, we still have lots to talk about a year later. Thanks in part to the Republican tax overhaul bill. Maria Bartiromo. Maria joins us tonight. Maria, thanks a lot for coming on. So I want to run this by you. We talked to the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee last night, Kevin Brady of Texas, and we asked, look, this bill seems to give a tax cut to all corporations, but maybe raise taxes on some Americans. Is that true? Here's what he said. Your pledge as chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee is that nobody is going to wind up with less money if this passes?
In my belief, between these tax cuts and higher paychecks and growth, whether you're that worker on Main Street or that small business on Main Street, you're going to see more in your paycheck. You're going to see more in your pocketbook.
So nobody loses. Do you think that's true?
Well, Tucker, you know, he sort of put in there the word growth. And I do think that this is a growth tax plan. However, it's very hard for me to say, look at you and say people are not going to see a tax increase. There are some people here who are seeing a tax increase. The bulk and the beauty of this plan is about the corporate rate. Taking the corporate rate down to 20%, you would think, has legs. In other words, it is going to have impact because companies will be doing better. They'll be investing in their businesses. They'll use that extra savings to hire more people. So overall, the economy you would expect will get better. Having said that, there are winners and losers here. It feels like they are raising taxes on a portion of the people, millionaires, for example. If you make $1 million or more, you will probably, and you're from New York or California or New Jersey or Illinois, you will probably see higher taxes as a way to pay for a 20% corporate tax rate. I mean, there's just no other way to look at it. I mean, there are also winners and losers in other things like the family tax credit. They're spending $650 billion on a family tax credit. That's great for families. If you don't have kids, you don't get that benefit. So depending on where you work, where you live, whether or not you have children, will all dictate what your tax return looks like. The truth is this is a $1.5 trillion plan. They've got $1.5 trillion to work with to cut taxes, and $900 billion of that, Tucker, is for the business cuts. So it's very easy to see that they have to raise taxes on some people by eliminating certain deductions, like eliminating the state and local, to pay for their lower corporate tax rate.
Can you sell that plan? The idea that investors will benefit at the expense of regular people? I mean, it seems like it'd be pretty hard to sell that given where the economy is right now.
Well, it's these rules around it's the rules in the Senate and reconciliation that are forcing them to only stand by $1.5 trillion in tax cuts. Because if they didn't have these rules, they could cut taxes on everybody. But, you know, the truth is this plan is largely about cutting corporate taxes to create an environment for business so that business puts their money back in the economy and hires more people. But when you eliminate that deduction in state and local, you're certainly going to lose a big impact. You're going to have a big impact if you're from New York and you use that deduction, and you will see higher taxes. Having said that, I do believe a lowered corporate tax rate will have legs and will have impact in growing the economy.
I mean, I want that to be true, absolutely, and I understand the reasoning behind it, but a lot of people I know who work at the top end of American industry are doing really, really, really well, better than anyone's ever done in the history of the world, and they're all flying private, and yet we still have stagnant wage growth and a ton of unemployed people. So if they make more, are we sure that that's going to wind up helping the middle class?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, because the question being asked, the lawmakers now is, how do we know that businesses are going to use that savings to actually hire more people and invest in their business? Maybe they'll just buy back stock. And the president was asked that question. He said, fine, buying back stock is okay too. Look, the bottom line is this. The top 10% of earners pay 71% of all the tax. So what I've been saying a lot recently is it feels like you're cutting taxes on people who don't pay taxes. How about cutting taxes on the top 10% that pay the taxes? But again, I mean, something's got to give. We've got $20 trillion in debt. You've got the left saying that this is a tax cut for the rich. And in some cases, I feel like they did get bullied by being forced, bullied by these talking points, by being forced to raise taxes on some people. But something's got to give, and it does have to be paid for. I don't think you could count on growth paying for everything.
Thank you, Maria. I knew you would explain it better than anyone else could. And thank you for coming back a year later. Don't miss Mornings with Maria from 6 to 9 Eastern. It's the best Fox Business. Maria Bartiromo, thank you. Well, did giant crabs with claws as powerful as lions' jaws kill an American hero? It's a bizarre story, but it is a story, and it's next. Of course, you'll be shocked to learn this, but there's an awful lot of dumb analysis from the press swirling around that attack 2 weeks ago on Senator Rand Paul. Journalists at the Washington Post, Business Insider, and many other places have described that assault, which, by the way, left Paul badly injured, as, quote, mysterious. CNN called it a case so mysterious that it borders on the preposterous. Okay, so here are some clues. The guy who attacked Rand Paul, a doctor named Boucher, was a left-wing nut with extremist views. In May, he posted this piece on Facebook, quote, "May Robert Mueller fry Trump's gonads." It turns out Boucher was a full-fledged member of the resistance, not a guy into compromise. Maybe exactly the kind of guy who might attack you on your front lawn if he disagreed with your politics. But no, say geniuses in the media, it must have been a landscaping dispute. Just like the San Bernardino terror attack was workplace violence. Just like the Kennedy assassination, carried out by a self-described communist who defected to the Soviet Union, was somehow a right-wing plot. Oh, tell us more, all-knowing journalists. Actually, just be quiet for once, if you would. Well, earlier this year, we told you about a newly discovered photograph that possibly showed aviator Amelia Earhart was possibly captured by the Japanese after crashing on her famous final flight. Not clear that happened, but today there's another even less pleasant theory about what happened to the great aviator, Amelia Earhart. She may have been eaten by man-eating, in this case woman-eating, 10-pound, 3-foot-long coconut crabs. They do exist. A British aviator discovered a skeleton matching Earhart's frame in the 1940s on the Isle of Nikomaroro. That island is covered, mispronouncing it no question, by coconut crabs. They are named coconut crabs because they can crush coconuts or bones with their immense claws. It took us a while to find someone who's met a coconut crab and survived to tell the tale, but Jeff Corwin, the famous wildlife expert, is such a man, and he joins us tonight to describe the experience. So, Jeff, are we overstating the power of a coconut crab?
They are, Tucker, incredibly powerful crustacean. They have a crusher claw that is nothing to mince with. It has thousands of pounds of pressure per square inch. And they actually use those claws to peel back the husk of a coconut, just as you would peel back a banana. These amazing animals that use claws to get at the pulp flesh of a coconut.
Well, that's horrifying. I mean, do people coexist with these crustacean predators?
Well, it's horrifying if you're a coconut. But
yes.
If you're not horrifying, the truth is that these animals have allowed to become so big, Tucker, and so supreme, almost like the apex predator islands, because they don't have the competition with mammals. They live in islands where they are numero uno, so they're not competing with other creatures, and that's how they take the top level of the food chain on ecosystems. But people do live with them, and in fact, they're considered a delicacy. And Marlon Brando, when he took over his island in the Polynesia Pacific Ocean, he actually ate the regional population of coconut crabs to extinction.
Huh. He ate them to death. That's not surprising somehow. But would they pose a threat to the remains of a hapless crashed aviator?
Well, here's the thing, is as with many crustaceans, I mean, just think of it. You know the Eastern Shore. You love to fish. You and your kids go down to Florida. I'm sure you've seen blue crabs. What do you catch blue crabs with? Use bait, like old bits of chicken or mackerel, stuff like that. So, of course, you can't be practiced to things like carrion. And in the rest of them, you would have other animals that would do this. But these are the massive. But essentially, Tucker, what a coconut crab is a mega version of a hermit crab. Yes, they would eat something that was dead, such as birds. They've often known great sea turtle nests and fish and stuff like that. But it's not implausible. It was an mammal carcass that they could potentially feed on.
Okay. Well, I don't know if we're any closer to solving the mystery, but I appreciate the perspective. Jeff, judging by the connection, I think you may be on assignment surrounded by Gila monsters somewhere, and I appreciate you taking the time to tell us about that. Thank you. I can't hear you, but I want to wish you luck wherever you are. It's been an amazing year here on this show. Look back at our very first show, and we will tell you what's in store ahead, in the many years ahead, we hope. Stay tuned. A year ago tonight, we launched the show. We were at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then a few months later, we found ourselves at 9 p.m. And then in April at 8 p.m., you followed us up and down the clock, and we're grateful for that. The show has changed a lot in a year. We hope we stayed true to what we set out to do at the very beginning. We hope we remain true for the next year and beyond. Here's a flashback to our first night on the air a year ago. Welcome to the first edition of the eponymously named Tucker Carlson Tonight Show. I got a haircut for the show. We're glad you're here.
Probably wasn't smart for all these national security experts. A lot of them are really good people, but to sign these letters and Trump's dangerous to the world. I mean,
well, not just some experts, but like the entire foreign policy establishment. So the question
because they were always right. Because they made all the right decisions.
Is there a group that was wrong more consistently than the people who run
other than the press corps and calling this election?
Who's going to believe the New York Times, the Washington Post, which is even worse, or NBC News, or CBS? I mean, isn't this just the beginning of their collapse and a new era of alternative media, which may not be good, by the way, but that's going to happen?
I think it was a fearful response from the Times editors saying, oh my gosh, we really missed something here.
The Democrats don't talk about middle-class economic issues anymore. They talk about global warming or esoteric social issues like who should use what bathroom. These are not issues that the average person making $40 grand a year cares at all about, because why would he?
Donald Trump, as you know, tapped into the working man and woman. He spent that time in Wisconsin and spent that time in Michigan and really understood what was the underbelly of what this was all about, jobs and the economy.
People in power tend to lie, not because they want to, but because they can't help themselves. That's human nature. The more power people have, the bigger the temptation to misuse it. The press is supposed to be the watchdog against all of this, and it worked fine for a couple of centuries. But then the press decided they had more in common with certain politicians than with readers or viewers, and that's when it fell apart. We're going to get back to basics here. We're going to hold the powerful accountable, pierce pomposity, translate doublespeak, mock smugness, and barbecue nonsense every night. Hope you'll watch. It's been a fun year, and more than anything, I want to thank the people who produce it, the show's staff, to the crew behind the scenes, really the best ever. And more than anything, of course, thank you for tuning in every night. We promise to continue to be the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and especially groupthink. Have a great night. Here's Sean Hannity.
All right, you only took 10 seconds of my time. I only get an hour. No, I'm kidding. By the way, we do work with the best people. Congratulations.